The other night I was talking to Dad on the phone, and he said something that I thought was a really profound message about the legacy that fathers have. And we were talking about my grandpa, and I wanted him to share that story.
What a privilege and what a joy it is to be with my son Bryan on this Father's Day today. And I had many great opportunities in life to make a little bit of difference in many people's lives and in my community, but I think the biggest calling I have had in life is being a father. And a father to my son Bryan and my daughter Cindy, and I think there's no greater calling than being that parent, that father, and loving their mother during that time. And as I was thinking about this, thought about my father, Floyd White. I met many great people and many that were not great known, but who have influenced my life. I'm a product of so many people who have mentored me and continue to mentor me in this day and age. And some were well known, some were not. But my father, Floyd White, was a man who was very humble. He was called into the ministry when he's in his 30s and had 3 children already during the Depression, and it was hard. Those little churches he served couldn't pay their salary during that time, and he had to struggle so much. And Dad was a man who probably didn't have the opportunity to go to seminary to get the training. He didn't have probably the greatest talents as I look back now, and he was a very humble man, but loved people and loved the rest of us in many ways. And Dad was one that was there for us and with us. Dad was one came out of a generation that talking to my brother Dale, and we never really ever heard Dad say, "I love you," in words. And yet there was never a day of my life that I didn't know my dad loved me. And he influenced me, and he had such a great impact upon me, but upon so many. 4 of his 6 sons, which he felt was his legacy, his sons, 4 of his 6 sons went into the pastoral ministry. 1 did not stay there. He moved into other kind of ministry. But he touched and never served a large church. I think the largest church he served was not as large as the first church I served back in Kansas many years ago. And yet he had the fruit of the Spirit in his life. He lived the fruit. And he had that, and he touched lives. And even though I can't remember a word he said in any sermon, and I listened all through my young years, listened to Dad preach, and yet his life was a sermon to me. In his influence, in his mentoring, and he probably never, I don't ever remember him using the word mentor, but that's what he was. A caring, loving father, a mentor to me to help mold me into the person I was going to become. And I remember Dad came back to visit me in my first church, my first full-time church back in Kansas. This is many, many years ago. He had retired, and I was having my first church out of graduate school. And we were down, this little town was about 500 people. It was a farming community. I was to build a new building there and also to merge 2 little churches that were 3 miles apart but didn't want to merge. And we went down to the local service station where the entertainment for the day was watching a friend of mine change tires for all these farmers. And as we stood around there was a man that was there every day who was, he was mentally challenged. He lived in what was then not called a foster home, but a foster home. And Dad said to me after I introduced him, and he said, "Edsel," he said, "you get to know that man. That man has something to teach you." And Dad had that philosophy that everyone had something to teach us. And Dad learned, and Dad taught, and Dad shared. And so we go out on the fountain, around the fountain. There's a little plaque there from Mom and Dad. I often stop by there just to kind of talk to them and give some thoughts. But I think of this man who, in the time he lived, not serving any large churches, but that influence he had upon the people. The percentage of those that went into the pastoral ministry or into leadership in churches was astounding from that, because of his life. Not because of any words he probably said, but the life he lived. And I, just a few years ago, I served on a church camp over at Wallow Lake, and they received a bequest from a man who Dad had taken as a youth to his camp 80 years ago And the man left a sizable amount of money to the youth ministry at camps in Dad's name. I'd never even heard of the man. But again, Dad had that ability to impact people. And so today, as we celebrate this Father's Day, I thank God for one of the greatest people in my life who influenced me so much, my father, Floyd White.